खिलाफत के अमी हम हैं, अमानत हम संभालेंगे, जो नेमत छिन।
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Today we're going to be talking about the need of Khilafat, of course, on this very blessed day. It's important for us to understand the importance of it and how we can utilize it to the best effect. And we'll start today with a recitation from the Holy Quran, which will be from Surah An-Nur, which is chapter 24, and we'll be reciting verse 56, which is also known as Ayat Istikhlaf. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وعد الله الذين آمنوا منكم وعملوا الصالحات ليستخلفنهم في الأرض كما استخلف الذين من قبلهم وليمكنن لهم دينهم الذي ارتضى لهم وليبدلنهم من بعد خوفهم أمنا يعبدونني لا يشركون بي شيئا ومن كفر بعد ذلك فأولئك هم الفاسقون. I seek refuge with Allah from Satan the accursed, in the name of Allah, the most gracious, the ever merciful. Allah has promised to those among you who believe and do good works that He will surely make them successors in the earth, as He made successors from among those who were before them, and that He will surely establish for them their religion which He has chosen for them, and that He will surely give them in exchange security and peace after their fear. They will worship me, and they will not associate anything with me. Then whoso is ungrateful after that, they will be the rebellious. That was Surah An-Nur, chapter 24, verse 56. The topic of today's talk is a really important one, because we all understand as Ahmadis that Khilafat is incredibly important. Many of us would happily give our lives for the sake of beloved Hazur Aqdas Ayyidah Ta'ala bin Nasr al-Aziz. And of course this has also been the case throughout all the Khulafa, not only of the Promised Messiah but of the Holy Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam as well. And as we've just heard in the translation of the verse that I recited, Allah Himself has promised that this is an institution that He will establish on the earth, and through it He will take us from a feeling and a situation of fear into one of peace and security. Now, whenever I hear about the concept of Khilafat, it brings to mind one of my favorite hadiths of the Holy Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, favorite sayings of the Holy Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, which is Al-Imamu Junnatun, a really simple hadith, that the Imam is a shield. But of course there is a need to understand what this actually means as well. It is not just simply that the Imam is there to protect us. That is a very base meaning. But in fact there is many other connotations and understandings that can come from this hadith. And it is important for us to understand how it is, for example, that we can wield this shield. How do we pick it up? How do we use it to save ourselves? And then how do we understand the importance of that shield and use it to make our lives better? This is an incredibly important thing. Whenever I hear about the concept of the Imam being a shield, it brings to mind a historic reference of the Testudo shell formation, which is basically, many of you will know and recognize it when I explain it, where the Romans would often come together and they would all take their individual shields, and by putting them together in a certain formation where the shields would protect from the front, from the sides, and from the top, they would create this almost impregnable moving formation which safeguarded from all arrows and spears and things that would come at them while they were on the battlefield. And for me, that's exactly what Khilafat is. Khilafat is this shield formation whereby the formation itself constitutes of the members of the Jamaat, where the members of the Jamaat come together as individuals with their own individual shields, and when they come together they form this whole shield on top, and this one unified entity is Khilafat. And while they remain within that shield, they're completely safeguarded. And in fact, even historians say that this was such a brilliant way of defense, and it actually was one of the ways in which the Romans conquered many lands and many other empires. And so, in many ways, Khilafat is this impregnable force which acts as a shield in our day-to-day. But it's not only, it would be unfair rather to compare it directly to this shell formation, because one thing that historians say about this testudo shell was that it would slow individuals down, and that people would sacrifice their speed, their individual speed, as in they wouldn't be able to run up the battlefield as fast, and they'd sacrifice that for the protection that the shield would offer. But in many ways, and indeed in every way, Khilafat is that testudo shield which actually increases one's ability to perform and increases one's speed at which they solve problems, or they climb mountains, or that they defeat their odds and oppositions. So in fact, in many ways, this is the ultimate form of defense, because not only does it protect us and safeguard us, but it also speeds us up as well. And for anyone in any form of defense, they would know that this is one of the most, the pinnacle of what you would want, something that can keep you safe and increase your speed. So whenever I hear about Khilafat, I think of that shell formation, that every individual has come and they've brought their shields with them. And because of the guidance of Khilafat, they have managed to place it in such a way that safeguards everyone within that shield. And of course, if someone was to drop a shield and to stick their head out, for example, we all know what would happen. They would immediately become the target. And the same way, it's beautiful because we know and understand that while we stay behind that shield of Khilafat, we're fine. And as soon as we try to go beyond the shield, it's like us sticking our heads out past the shield. When we have a shield, a clever and intelligent person would know to keep behind it and to only go forward when they know that they should be. And indeed, in this case, Khilafat itself, whenever it instructs an individual to go forward and do something, we know that is for the best reasons and with the best intentions at heart. And so Khilafat for me, indeed, is this beautiful idea of a shield. But in the same way then, of course, having given this example, and I know that everyone will have understood that example, but Khilafat isn't a physical, it's not a physical shield. In fact, I mean, Khudam al-Ahmadiyya and the members of all the members of the Jamaat, we ourselves would be ready within seconds to give our lives for Khilafat. Many of us go and do the security duty at Islamabad, or indeed we follow Huzur on his tours, and we would be ready at a second to do and to provide any sacrifice. So of course, this is not a physical shield. So then what is it? In fact, the way that we wield the shield, the way that we pick the shield up and to utilize it and to use it in our day-to-day, is to understand the teachings that come with Khilafat. To understand that Khilafat is a God-given gift, and the teachings and the guidances that are given to us are those that are given by God. And the way that we can protect ourselves using this shield is in fact to take those teachings and those guidances and to wrap ourselves in them. So that when we are told that this is something that you should do, this is something that you shouldn't do, to take them and to utilize them and to inculcate them in our lives. And this is the way that we safeguard ourselves. This is the way that you pick that shield up and that you save yourselves and indeed those around you. And in many ways, this is in fact, when you look at all these concepts that come together, they all say the same message. They all give the same idea. Because when we look at the concept of Khilafat, we see Al-Imamu Junnatun. We read Ayat Istikhlaf, Surah Nur, verse 56, and again the one that we read in the beginning. This explains that it will change you from a state of fear into a state of security and peace. We look at the concept of righteousness, which comes from the word taqwa. Now taqwa, even though we call it righteousness in an anglicized way, taqwa literally means to save yourself. It's explained that if you were to walk through a narrow path and there's thorny bushes on either side, to save your clothes as you walk past so that they don't get snagged and ripped and torn. So all of these things are talking about the sense of security and safeguarding and protecting yourself. So righteousness, God has given us an instruction to act with righteousness, to save yourself. And how do you save yourself? By using the shield. So God has told us what to do, and then he's given us the tools by which to use it. It's like someone saying, this is the surgery that needs to be performed. These are the tools that you need to carry out the surgery. But for an individual to stand there and say, no, I understand that there was a need for the surgery to take place, but actually I'm going to use something completely different. I'm not going to use the specific tools that have been provided. Forget the scalpel, I'm going to use a shovel. It doesn't make any sense. God has instructed us to do something, and then has therefore given us the tools, the exact and precise tools by which to use it. Hence, taqwa, righteousness, to save oneself from evil or from misguidance. The way to do that is to attach yourself to this shield. And in fact, God also mentions that this shield is the hablullah. وَاعْتَصِمُوا بِحَبْلِ اللَّهِ جَمِيعًا وَلَا تَفَرَّقُوا. That hold fast by the rope of Allah and do not become divided. Again, this rope of Allah is Khilafat. This one direct link that joins mankind to God. I mean, the example is easy. I mean, we've all heard Noah's Ark, and we've all heard about the concept of being drowning at sea, and there's a ship, and there's one line that goes off the ship, and it's in the sea. And this is the hablullah. If someone was drowning and someone threw you a lifeline, which fool would decide not to clasp that rope and to pull himself to safety? So this indeed is the same rope which God has sent. وَعَدَ اللَّهُ الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا مِنْكُمْ. That God has promised us. That God has given us this tool and is telling us that وَاتَّصِمُوا. Hold on to it. Hold on to this shield. Hold on to this rope. But just as a rope and a shield doesn't just need you to touch it, it needs you to pick it up. The shield is heavy. It's heavy because it's there to block the blows of the opponents, but it requires effort to hold it. The rope, there's no point in just holding on to the end of a rope while you're still in the middle of the sea. You have to climb the rope. All of these things require effort. And that effort is to try and to listen to the instructions and the guidances of Hazrat Khalifatul Masih, and then to try to inculcate them in your day-to-day lives. And of course, whenever we listen to anyone talking, we try to take the best out of what they're saying. But no doubt the person who is most connected to Allah the Almighty, the person who has been promised to us as a blessing from God, he stands every single week for an hour and instructs us as to how to best utilize our lives. It's like it's like an engineer coming to your house every week to tell you how to utilize a certain piece of equipment in your home. And then he'll come back next week and tell you another top tip, as it were. And for us to ignore it completely. It's like a professor. Any of us that have gone to university or school, if a teacher's coming in and telling you something, then maybe you listen, maybe you don't. You should, of course. But if someone comes in, a professor or a teacher, and he says that what I'm about to tell you will come on the test, everyone's notepads or laptops or pens and papers come out straight away, because we know that it's for our own benefit and that we know this is going to come on the test. But when beloved Hazur, Hazrat Khalifatul Masih Khamis, Ayyadah Ta'ala bin Nasr Aziz, when he comes on every week, having been told what's on this special test by Allah the Almighty, being told that this is what you must tell the servants of the Promised Messiah, he comes on every week and explains to us with such love and care as to what we should do to be able to pass this test of God. Indeed, definitely the most important test of our entire lives, and indeed afterlives. Some of us are listening, some of us are not listening, some of us take notes, some of us are just letting it go over our heads. Because remember, simply sitting there and listening to the khutbah is not enough. Hazur doesn't require us just to sit there and to listen to his words. Hazur explains to us and instructs us to act in the way of Allah the Almighty. And that is the ultimate goal. That if we don't just listen to Hazur, rather we take Hazur's words on board and then we act on it. And in fact, this is what we would call the true concept of love as well. And what I mean by that is that recently, of course, we know that our beloved master, Hazrat Khalifatul Masih Khamis, Ayyadah Ta'ala bin Nasr Aziz, unfortunately took a fall and injured himself. And of course, many of us were incredibly upset by this. Many of us were in tears, doing prayers, sending in praying nawafil, sending sadaqah, all this kind of thing. But actually, what the most important thing to remember is that alongside feeling this upset and this sadness, we should remember that we must act upon Hazur's words. Only then can we claim to truly love Hazur. If someone sits there and ignores what Hazur is saying, and yet then afterwards says and claims that, I love Hazur so much, I'm so upset that happened, it is hollow. Hazur is Hazur, and Hazur is that beautiful and respected figure because he comes with the message of God. He comes with the teachings of Allah the Almighty, because he is at the moment the root of our salvation. When we follow his words, we follow the teachings of Islam, and thereby, by understanding through his wisdom and knowledge, we attain a closeness to Allah the Almighty, that hablullah, that shield that protects us from all onslaughts. But there is no point in us looking at a shield, a beautiful jeweled shield on the floor, and saying, what a beautiful shield, and yet we are being struck by arrows every second that we stand on the battlefield. The purpose of that shield is to be yielded, to be picked up, to be utilized, to be understood. That rope in the middle of the ocean is not there to be, look at how beautiful this rope is. No. The rope is there to be held onto, to be seized, and then to be climbed, to be endeavored towards. And that will get us onto that ship, that ark of salvation. So this is incredibly important to remember. We all love our mothers and our fathers, and if a mother tells us to do something, if our ummi comes in and says, "Beta ye karo, do this for me," if we were to turn around and say, "No, don't feel like it, I'm not going to do that," if we are not obedient to our mothers, how can then we claim to love her? If our father comes in and tells us to do something and we ignore him, or we say no to him, how can we claim to love him? And in fact, if someone else was to come in front of you and claim to love their mother or father, and yet was to ignore them and be disobedient to them, you would also say, how can you claim to love such a person? In the same way, Hazur Aqdas instructs us to do certain things. He instructs us on a weekly basis with love and with care, with compassion and with empathy. And it's our duty, therefore, to understand what Hazur is saying, but then to act on it as well. And only then can we claim to be true lovers and true followers of Hazur. And the same, of course, goes for the Promised Messiah. Of course, we remember that the Khulafa are the representatives of the Promised Messiah. And so when we come across a teaching or a guidance, it's our responsibility to act on it. Not just to say, "Oh, alhamdulillah, we listened to the Hazur's khutbah today." In fact, it's not only the way that we treat Hazur that should be kept in mind, and the way that we listen and adhere to his guidances and teachings. In fact, even if you just look at the person of Hazrat Khalifatul Masih al-Khamis, Ayyadah Ta'ala bin Nasr al-Aziz, there are countless examples throughout the time that he has been in office, and indeed before he has been in the office of Khilafat, where we understand just how much Hazur puts almost his life on the line. He puts his life on the line, his livelihood on the line, his family on the line, everything that he wants, his desires, his wishes, absolutely everything that this man wanted, he put on the line for the sake of God the Almighty, and for the sake of serving the members of the Jamaat. Sayyid al-Qawmi Khadimuhum, the leader of a people, is their servant. And of course, no one would ever see Hazur as a servant, but indeed, Hazur himself acts tirelessly. Hazur acts as if he is there for each one of us. Of course, there are times when we are, when we feel, even when we see Hazur's love, or we see Hazur's wrath, or Hazur's anger. All of this is an example of his love towards us. And it's up to us and our responsibility that even if it may hurt at the time, or if we feel that we have been given restrictions against, or we have been told off, for lack of a better word, by the Jamaat, it is our responsibility for us to understand that this is indeed Hazur's love, and this love comes from Allah the Almighty. Of course, even Allah the Almighty, we would never say that Allah the Almighty doesn't love his people and love the people of the world, but even then we see Allah's wrath comes on people, Allah's anger comes on people. And Hazur is such a person that gives us so many chances. Hazur gives us so much love and understanding, and he wishes for us to be better people. And in regards to this, of course, there are many instances where we see just how much effort and endeavor Hazur puts into his day-to-day, where of course we know that he stands up every week and gives an hour Friday sermon. We know that he gives his durus, he leads the daily prayers 5 times a day. Of course, now in COVID-19 we all know and have experienced the how to perform the 5 daily prayers and how to lead the 5 daily prayers. And we all know, just if someone was to give us that responsibility, and that alone, it is responsibility enough. But to add to that all the speeches and the durus and the visits and the mulaqats in the morning and the mulaqats in the evening and the letters and the advices, and someone comes in with their marital difficulties, or they're not having children, or their children are in trouble at school, or there are so many countless problems that we always take them to Hazrat Khalifatul Masih, and we go into that office with that state of fear. And yet see how the Holy Quran has predicted this. It says, when we go into that state of Khilafat turns your state of fear into that of security and peace. And every single person that's ever stepped into the office of Hazrat Khalifatul Masih will feel that same thing as well. They go in with their trepidations and their fears, and they come out content and happy and with a plan to move forward. And there are a couple of examples that I want to just say to you, and I think they're very, very important for us to remember. And they show us just how beautiful the character of Hazur is, and how much Hazur endeavours and puts effort into his responsibility towards us. And that should be a lesson for us as to how much effort and responsibility and care we should do in terms of our relationship with Khilafat. During 2016, when Hazur Akhtar's today visit of Canada, and this is from Abid Khan Sahib's diary, at one point Abid Sahib basically mentions that Hazur was sitting in a class, and Hazur was visibly getting very, very quite ill, and he asked for the air conditioning to be turned off because he was feeling unwell and he had a fever. And this gradually of course got worse, and he was feeling very, very unwell. And yet despite this, Hazur continued to do mulaqats, Hazur continued to meet people, despite being asked by members of the Ghafla to perhaps take a rest and to perhaps move the mulaqats and the meetings and everything forward so that he may rest for a little while. Hazur did not. And in fact later on, after all the work had been completed, not before, Hazur Akhtar said, and this always touches my heart, Hazur said, "Today I felt extremely unwell. I had a high fever, a throbbing headache, and other feverish symptoms. During parts of the class and then during the lunch at Jamia, I felt particularly unwell, and I'm not sure how I managed to carry on. Even when I was walking to the mosque," listen to this, "even when I was walking to the mosque, at one point I felt I might fall, but was just able to control myself." We decide not to go to the mosque or to lie down, take the day off work when we have small inconveniences or small illnesses in our life. And look at Hazur, and that's something that we get paid for. Hazur, without being paid for, without doing anything, he puts himself on the line, his health at risk, and he endeavours so much so that even when he's about to fall over, he pushes himself on so that he can meet the members of the Jamaat, so he can show the people that he loves them and that he cares for them. In fact, a little bit later on, Hazur mentioned to Abid Sahib, and he said, this is about a week later, he said, "I remained very unwell for a few days after the Jamia class, both during the day and at night. Some evenings I would wake up in a cold sweat and was feeling terrible. Hopefully most people will not have been aware as my duties continued as normal." Even in that state, Hazur cares that we don't worry about Hazur. That is the true leader. That is that compassionate and loving leader that we know as beloved Hazur. When he stands up every week, we don't know what he's gone through. We don't know what pain he's going through or what taklif he is going through. And yet, without fail, to lead namaz, to give us durus, to stand up and talk to us like he's our father, like we are his children, to say, "Please do this, it will save you, it will make your life better, you will go to heaven. Please don't do that, that will cause your destruction." To give us so much love and compassion. It is our duty then to understand Hazur and to try to inculcate what he says. And I'll leave you with this other part as well. Just after, of course, we know the Ghafla goes with Hazur, and at one point Dr. Tanveer Sahib, who was on duty with the Ghafla as a doctor, in that same time when Hazur was unwell, you'd think that the doctor would be called and the doctor would help. But later, Dr. Sahib told Abid Sahib about what Hazur had said to him after he called him, and after having been unwell, he told him that he had been unwell. And Dr. Sahib said, Hazur called me and told me that one night he had been very sick and felt his temperature was incredibly high. He said that he was thinking of calling me, Hazur was thinking of calling Dr. Sahib, to ask that I bring a thermometer so he could check his temperature. But listen to this. But he decided to refrain from doing so because he did not want to worry me or create any panic. A man has gone with Hazur for the purpose of looking after Hazur's health. Hazur's woken up in the middle of the night in a complete fever sense and shaking and trembling with fever. He thinks to call the doctor whose only purpose is there to look after Hazur's health. And he doesn't. Why? Because he didn't want to worry him. He didn't want to disturb him. That's the amount of care that Hazur has for us. You'll all know the example of going into Hazur's office. Abid Sahib once saw Hazur mending his, those notepads, those 99p really cheap notepads that you get, the spiral ones at the top. And Hazur was sitting there and he was mending it. A 99p notepad. Something that Hazur could click his fingers and thousands would be brought to him. But that's his humility, his humbleness, his care, his compassion. And he cares about us in every moment of our lives and his life. He cares about us worrying more than he cares about his own health. To wake up trembling in the middle of the night and to have a doctor on call who will come there and then. How many of us would give up that opportunity? That is Hazur. That is our beloved Hazrat Khalifatul Masih al-Khamis, whose every living moment he spends for the sake of us. It's our responsibility to hold that shield, to climb that rope, and to thank Allah the Almighty for the blessing that is Khilafat. I mean, look around us. There are so many people struggling. They're drowning in the sea. They're being peppered with arrows on the battlefield. And it's us as Ahmadis that have that shield in front of us, that have that rope to climb to safety, given no less by Allah the Almighty. But it's our responsibility to wield that shield, to climb that rope. And we do that by samina wa atana, to listen to Hazur and then to act upon what he says. May Allah the Almighty give our beloved King, our Master, a long and healthy life. May Allah enable Hazur to attain every happiness that he wishes. May all of his desires and plans come to fruition. May Allah the Almighty enable us to live up to his expectations. May Allah the Almighty pardon our shortcomings and enable us to be true Ahmadi Muslims and followers of the promised Messiah alayhi salatu wasalam. Wa akhiru da'wana and alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen.